Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our LASS 2020 and our poster session today. I've called this a poster session, our technology poster session, given that most of the posters that you'll be hearing about today have something to do with technology. So we're so thankful that all of you were able to join us. I know this year is a little different than past years, but it does not take anything away from the quality of the work that we have, the wonderful students who've put time and effort into not only learning, but going above and beyond. Many of these students completed work for their class, but also went to the extra level of preparing something special to share with you today. So they've done research that, again, not only their professors appreciated, but that a committee of faculty at Oglethorpe felt was strong enough to share with a greater community. So congratulations to all of our presenters today. I've asked all of our presenters to prepare a short synopsis. So first, I will just go through the list and recognize all of our student researchers and the title of their presentation, of their poster presentation. Then each of them will give a short synopsis of the work that they did. And then I will put them in breakout rooms so that they can be there, and then any guests can visit those breakout rooms and ask specific questions. So that way you can have some one-on-one time with the different presenters. And I'll explain the instructions for that when we get to that part of the session. I know some people will be leaving to go to other poster sessions during this time. That's wonderful. Thank you for joining us for the time that you can. But we're gonna go ahead and, like I said, at first I'll read out all of the student researchers and the title of their presentation. First, I'd like to recognize Maya Babbs, Gail Ramos, and Justin Thompson. Their work is entitled The Importance of Centrality in the World Health Organization's Network when Talking about the Coronavirus. Kendal Kosek is speaking to us today about using NodeXL to explore the conversations around the Astros sign stealing scandal. David Swillum, Katie Hunter, and Elizabeth Gomes are going to be speaking to us about social media reactions to the coronavirus with NodeXL analytics. Veronica Mitchell, Omar Toubassy, and Desirae Golden will be speaking to us about understanding Greta's climate movement via Twitter. Doris Gonzalez and Valencia prepared research on the interaction activity in terms of replies and mentions for Wendy's consumers in relation to the keywords roast and savage on Twitter. Rebecca Bryant and Zoe Nelson have created work entitled Machine Learning and Credit Fraud Detection. Mikayla, Ries, and Emily Schultz have completed work entitled, Does Manipulating Signature Location Really Increase Honesty? So I hope you're all intrigued by those titles. We have some really interesting work here. I'd like to point out that this work has been done over the course of several months. So some of the students who prepared their work, it's very timely given the situation that we're in today, and they're happy to share that with you. So we're just going to go down the list, and each student, when I call out your name, you can unmute yourself and give us a short synopsis of your work. Let's start with the importance of centrality in the World Health Organization's network.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so we did the influence surrounding the coronavirus. We researched it back in February. And so we looked at the World Health Organization's network because they are one of the most reputable sources. And we were seeing who was influential within their network and whether if people who are reputable are influential, who or if it's people who are not reputable. So people who are just putting information out there. And we did this by using different centralities, which we'll go more into in our breakout room.
Dr. Keib, you're muted.
Thank you, Justin. Let's go ahead. Kendal, are you with us? I know she's got two posters to present. Are you with us this hour, Kendal? Okay, she's going to be coming in at 5 then. She has two posters. She's presenting the other one right now. So let's go ahead with David Swillum, Katie Hunter, and Elizabeth Gomes on social media reactions to the coronavirus.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So are we just like, we're just gonna talk about it and then share our posters in the breakout rooms, or are we doing that, share them now?
You can go ahead and pull your poster up if you'd like to have it up while you're speaking. You can share your screen.
Okay, I'm gonna do
It's up
that.
to you.
All right. So for our study, basically what we wanted to look at was how social consequences could be harmful to the beliefs and ideas being spread from the coronavirus. And what we looked at was different social media reactions um, about the coronavirus, where we saw these negative social consequences that came from them. And why we chose the coronavirus was because it was an ongoing trend even before it came to the United States, and majority of the reports, they talk about the impact of the virus on the impact of the virus on health. But we also noticed, looking on our social media feeds, that there was a lot of mass hysteria and fear about the virus, and in turn that resulted in a lot of discrimination towards Asians, and people just making kind of harmful comments about China, and just because that's where the virus originated from. And the technology we used was Node Excel, and it was just great for this specific topic because the fact that the coronavirus is an ongoing trend, and there was just an abundance of information that we were able to use from Node Excel and its Twitter platform to see these relationships and expose the relationship between social media, mass hysteria, and the coronavirus, and people's different reactions across social media platforms. And basically, the whole thing that you can see with Node Excel, and that you'll see more in the breakout rooms when we get there, is the different clusters and the reactions of what people say. And you will hear terms like hubs and pumps, ties and nodes. And basically what this terminology goes over is the very people that has this social media influence across Twitter, and how they can spread this mass hysteria and fear to other people, and in result create a whole reaction towards a certain group of people, and that could necessarily be projected in a negative way. So that's what we will be looking at in our breakout room.
Thank you, David.
And then unshare this real quick.
Okay, so now, David, if you want to go ahead and mute yourself. Oh, great, thank you. So now we are going to be hearing from Veronica Mitchell, Omar Toubassy, about understanding Greta's climate movement via Twitter. Veronica, Omar. Okay, we'll come back to them. Let's go ahead with Doris. She's going to be speaking to us today about the interaction activity in terms of replies and mentions for Wendy's consumers. Doris, are you available?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we chose to focus more on a company. So our research question was, what is the interaction activity in terms of replies and mentions for Wendy's consumers in relation to the keywords roast and savage on Twitter? So we mostly wanted to focus on how Wendy's has a big emphasis on brand personality and how consumers interact with the brand in how they choose to tweet certain things. And yeah, I'm not sure what.
Okay, thank you, Doris. And you can share your poster when you go into your breakout room.
Okay.
And how about Rebecca Bryant and Zoe Nelson, machine learning and credit card fraud detection?
Hello, so I'm Rebecca, and Zoe and I did our presentation on data analysis and machine learning, so the implementation of computer algorithms to make predictions on a data set. We ended up going with a model called a random forest regressor that uses different decision trees to categorize and make classifications on the individual data points, which determined whether or not a credit card transaction was legitimate or fraudulent. And Zoe's going to go ahead and get into the specifics of what we did a little bit more.
Hi, so what we ended up doing once we learned about some of these models was we entered a competition on this website called Kendal, and the competition used real-world credit card payment information, and we had about 400 pieces of information about each transaction, and we used these to create our model. A few things that we had to deal with that we can talk more about in our breakout session if anybody wants to is missing data that was not numerical that we had to deal with otherwise, and then just figuring out what kind of parameters that we needed to put into our model to have it create the best results. So we ended up getting about 92% accuracy, which we were very happy with. And we can talk more about how we got that in our breakout room.
Great, looking forward to that, thank you. Okay, Mikayla, Ries, and Emily Schultz, does manipulating signature location really increase honesty?
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so everyone can see the poster a bit better. There we go. So what we essentially were looking at is if by manipulating where a signature location is, if that increases honesty. Emily's going to kind of go ahead and give a nice introduction.
Yeah, so there's a lot of studies that have kind of conflicting results looking at whether you sign an honesty pledge before or after a procedure increases your honesty, and a lot of times they use monetary rewards and different kind of things to try to raise the stakes. But when these techniques are put into a real world context, the findings are kind of varied and they don't necessarily line up with the research. And so we attempted to recreate some of those studies and see if an honesty pledge increased or decreased students' willingness to admit to being dishonest.
And so we ran over 286 participants between the ages of 18 to 66, with just a little over half being female. And then we split all of our participants into one of three conditions: either they not signing a honesty pledge at all, signing it at the beginning of the study or at the end, following everything else. And then we measured honesty with two questionnaires: the Bus-Perry Aggression Questionnaire and then the Marlowe-Crown Desirability Questionnaire, which essentially measures impression management. And the results were interesting. We actually did not find any main effects of signature location on self-reported aggression levels or on impression management, but we did find that self-reported aggression and impression management were inversely correlated with each other.
And so our lack of findings was kind of interesting because the researcher from the study that we had primarily based our study on says that his study has been replicated with significant findings, but in the 7 years since that publication, we haven't found any studies that have had significant results. And so we questioned whether our design was possibly flawed because we didn't have any kind of raised stakes such as a monetary reward. And then we were also curious if signing the consent form, which participants have to do as part of the ethics that are required in psych studies, if that consent form might have affected our results and acted as an honesty pledge before they were put into any of the study conditions.
Again, very interesting work. Wonderful. Thank you all. So what I'm going to do now is I've gone through everybody, correct? Okay, so I am going to pause. We are recording so that others can view this later. I'm going to pause, put each of our research teams in breakout rooms, and then for those of you who are guests, I will allow you to go into any one of the rooms that you want to and bounce back and forth between them. What you'll do is you will tell me which room you want to go to. I'll assign you to that room. When you want to leave that room, you'll click Leave Breakout Room on Zoom. You'll come back to the main room and I can put you in another room. And so also to the presenters, I know you probably want to hear about each other's research, especially after those great summaries. So as long as one of you stays in the breakout room, you can also go visit your peers' rooms, just so long as one of you stays in your breakout room. And I will go through the list and ask each group to once again give us a little overview of your project. Why don't we start with our group with Maya Babbs, Gil Ramos, and Justin Thompson. Theirs is entitled The Importance of Centrality in the World Health Organization's Network when Talking About the Coronavirus. Take it away, group.
So we did our project on the coronavirus and influential people on it through centrality. So like many of the other groups, we use NodeXL for compiling our data to look at trends. And give me a second so I can pull up the PowerPoint. We had to first start off with truly trying to figure out what an influencer is, because most people will look at an influencer and by definition assume that it's just a person with a lot of followers. But truly an influencer is someone who wields influence for either positive or negative gain, or it's someone with a large amount of sway in an industry or a particular niche or community. And we broke influencers down into their types. So at the top, we have celebrities who are just influential in anything they particularly touch because they have a large following and they have fame on their side. Below them are industry experts and thought leaders like popular doctors, influential people within a certain field whose influence may or may not leak out of their field because of just the credibility and truthfulness they have toward a subject. And right below them are people with a large impact on social media that aren't really considered celebrities in the greater scheme. So people like, I guess, your favorite YouTuber or a newscaster, etc. And below them are bloggers and content creators that are rather niche, but still have an influence on their following. So after figuring out what an influencer was, we had to figure out what the coronavirus is and the best way to explain it. So at the time we gathered the data, the coronavirus, what we knew for health issues was that it was a novel virus and it was assumed to be able to affect animals and people. It would cause a range of respiratory illnesses and was moderately infectious, originating in a virus lab in Wuhan, China. At the time we gathered the data, the World Health Organization and China were working together to contain the virus. So our research question ended up being trying to define what type of centrality was best suited and most important to figure out who had the most influence tweeting about the virus in the World Health Organization's network when we were talking about the virus. Also, we've sought out to figure out if the influence on the virus was directly proportional to the centrality based on followers and engagement that a particular user or network had. And when we looked at the World Health Organization network, we decided to truly try to gauge who had the most influence in the terms of the centrality. We assumed for our research question purposes that the World Health Organization Twitter account would easily have the most because it was it's the World Health Organization and they should have the most credibility when talking about it. And so, Gil, if you will, explain the different types of centrality for our guests.
Perhaps we could stop there, Justin, and let us stay where we are and people can come to your room to hear more about it. Perhaps Gil, stay for a second. Why don't we move on? That's excellent and very intriguing. So we're kind of at a good hanging point there where people can come by. Why don't we see if David Swillum, Katie Hunter, or Elizabeth Gomes can tell us briefly about social media reactions to the coronavirus also, just a little bit about your work, and then we'll move on to the next group. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
Okay, you're gonna share the screen real quick?
Should we share the screen, or do you want me to just say it?
You can.
Okay, I didn't know how fast we want this to be.
Yeah, just maybe 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for joining us, everyone. Just a brief overview, basically of our study, just like the other group too, utilizing NodeXL. What we did with NodeXL was analyze the discussion of the coronavirus online, and we use NodeXL to do that. So basically our research question was what we wanted to look at as a group was the different reactions to the coronavirus on social media, particularly the Twitter platform, because that's what NodeXL allowed us to do with that platform. And what we wanted to look at inside of that was what were the social consequences of the harmful beliefs and ideas being spread. And, through seeing that, what we saw was a lot of insensitivity and racism and a lot of comments on Twitter, when we use our specific search terms and pull those analytics from utilizing NodeXL. Just a little bit about why we chose the coronavirus, last year. It was just starting to be in the headlines. It was an ongoing trend. So, with something being an ongoing trend, we knew that there would be an abundance of information, at the time that we would be able to pull from NodeXL and that Twitter database that it has. We also saw that, with all the talk, the majority of the talk being about the impact of this virus on people's health. Another thing we noticed as a group, though, just looking at our own Twitters, utilizing our own platforms, that, there was a lot of hashtags, ongoing trends, and things of that nature about people kind of just being negative towards, people of Asian descent or Chinese people on social media. So what we did was we, used some techniques that Dr. Keib had taught us, like search engine optimization and, how to make a term that will generate the most relevant and reliable results in basically particularly for your research question. We came up with no Chinese allowed and coronavirus racism. So we use those search terms to expose that relationship that people who are talking negatively about the virus and where it originated, how that can be in a relationship of how social media played into that. So here's Katie on, just some more about the graphs.
We can talk more about the actual getting into the graphs in our breakout room, but we're just kind of show some of the
David, can you mute your audio, please?
The graphs just kind of help show visualization of what we're seeing, like when it comes to the main things being said. So yeah, we have them for both the search terms. If you want to, know more about it, you can definitely come to our breakout room, because I don't want to try to explain this all here. But yeah, we just use NodeXL to help us understand what was being said, who was saying it, the main things that have become popular, and how these things are spreading racist, harmful ideas, and that impact in real life.
Excellent, thank you. I think after everyone saw that analysis there in the cluster graph, it really makes you hopefully more intrigued, if you haven't been in the room already, to see. And all of the NodeXL graphs have visualizations that are similar to that can help you see how we can uncover where conversations are happening on social media, whether it's around people, around topics, things like that. Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about something lighter. Let's hear a little bit about Wendy's and how they, the conversation around some of their keywords. So that research was completed by Doris Gonzalez and Valencia Barnes.
Okay, sorry. try to share my graph too, I guess. So, okay, basically, we were interested in seeing how Wendy's uses its brand personality to get interactions on Twitter. So we used two keywords, savage and roast, where we found that two very different patterns of interaction, which this is the data we got from using savage, and this one, sorry, this one's the one that we got from roast. So, well, there's a reason why the two patterns are different, which I guess we can talk about in our break room, but it was interesting to see how these two words are used to basically promote interaction intentionally by Wendy's to get people talking about it and increasing the word of mouth advertising.
Thank you very much, Doris. Why don't we switch gears a little bit off of social media and have Rebecca Bryant and Zoe Nelson talk about their work, machine learning and credit card fraud detection.
All right, so my name's Rebecca, and Zoe and I did our project under Dr. Merkel in data analysis and machine learning. Machine learning being the implementation of computer algorithms on data to make future predictions. So with this machine learning, we came up with a model for credit card fraud, and the model that we went with was a random forest regressor. And a random forest is a collection of these decision trees that you can see in the middle of that left panel there, in which each data point that's run through each decision tree is categorized by its features. And the results from each of the choices within the decision tree determined whether or not a transaction was legitimate or fraudulent. After that brief overview on machine learning and random forest, Zoe's going to get into a little bit of the specifics of what we worked with last semester.
Okay, so once we learned about these models, we decided that we wanted to enter a competition. So Kaggle.com is this website where all competitions are hosted by different organizations and also just by the website itself. But the competition provides you with data, and like Rebecca said earlier, our data was predicting whether credit card transactions were fraudulent or legitimate. So the data set contained about 400 pieces of information for about 600,000 transactions. And that's how we created our model. A few problems and things that we had to deal with were things like missing data that was not numerical that we had to figure out what to do with for our training our model, and also just figuring out what kind of parameters are. If you don't know what parameters are, we can talk about it in our breakout room, but what kind of parameters our model needed to use to get its best accuracy. And we did end up getting about 92% accuracy, which we were very happy with.
Excellent, thank you very much. Here, and finally, our last group, we're going to learn about honesty from Mikayla, Ries, and Emily Schultz. Do you want to give us a brief overview before we break out?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so it's a bit easier. So essentially, we were looking at if manipulating signature location really increased honesty. So Emily's going to kind of give a brief recap.
Yeah, so we based our study off of some previous studies that were looking at if when you signed an honesty pledge affected how honest you were with an activity. And so these previous studies did things such as having you fill out tax forms or take part in a card game that had a monetary reward for cheating. And it just tried to see if people were more honest if they signed before or after. And then when the studies were applied to a real world context, the findings kind of became controversial and they started contradicting each other. And so our study sought to really see if signature location on an honesty pledge really did affect the participants' honesty when they're completing an activity.
Yeah, so for our study, we ran 286 participants. Our independent variable was signature location, so they either signed an honesty pledge in the beginning, the end, or not at all. And then as far as the dependent variable honesty was measured through an aggression and a impression management questionnaire, and our results indicated that we did not find any significant main effects of signature location on self-reported aggression levels or on impression management, but we did find that self-reported aggression and impression management were negatively correlated with each other.
And so these findings were interesting because they did go against the study that we had based our study on. And so that could have been for a number of reasons that had to do with our actual study's design. But then there's also the initial study that we based it on hasn't had a successful replication since it was published. And so if you want to join us in the breakout room, we can talk a little bit more about that.
Great, that was a nice enticement there. And we have one more presentation to hear about. We have Kendal Kosek with us now, who used NodeXL to explore conversations around the Astros sign stealing scandal. So Kendal, if you want to just give us a brief overview of that, you can share your screen if you like, you don't have to, before we go to the breakout rooms. That would be awesome.
Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yes, Kendal, we can. That's great.
So since I'm the last person, you guys have already had the explanation of what NodeXL is. So I chose to use the NodeXL software to look at the Astros sign stealing scandal on Twitter. And if you guys don't know who, I probably shouldn't, but if you guys don't know what that was, basically the Houston Astros baseball team had a whistleblower come out and say that they stole pitching signs during the World Series a couple years ago. And it kind of blew up and was everywhere on social media and the news. So I wanted to look at how this affected baseball fans and players across the major leagues by looking at Twitter. So my research question was, what is the relationship between the use of Astros cheating as a phrase or using the hashtag Astros cheat through tweet, retweet, mention, etc.? Does the topic of the Astros sign stealing scandal have a larger presence through the use of this phrase or the hashtag? So my two search terms on NodeXL were Astros cheating or hashtag Astros cheat, and I had put this in a search box and it pulled about 6,000 tweets out that used either of the two. And in order to create this visual up over here on the right, you had to calculate metrics for your graph. So I calculated the overall metrics, the vertex in degree and out degree, and betweenness centrality. And betweenness centrality is basically how central or important a specific user is in the entire network, which is all the tweets that were pulled out in my search box. And then the vertices, which are each user, are grouped by this betweenness centrality in my visual. And then the vertices, or users that have this highest betweenness centrality, are labeled with their profile image. And then the edge, which is the gray lines or the relationship between two users, were changed for the users with the highest betweenness centrality as well. So this is the visual that I created from all the data that was pulled out off of Twitter, and it represents almost 5,000 Twitter users, which is quite a lot. And then the groups that I say here are based on which search term I pulled out. So the blue dots are people who use the phrase Astros cheating in a tweet, and then the orange dots are the people who use the hashtag. So as you can see, there's a lot more blue dots on my visual, which means that a lot more people use the phrase over a hashtag. So actually 66% of the tweets, people use the phrase rather than a hashtag. And then with the vertices, or the users with the highest betweenness centrality, are all the users up here who have their profile image shown. So basically these 5 users were the most central in the conversation that on Twitter. So the one here in the middle is the actual Astros verified Twitter account. So you would assume that they are one of the most central since this entire thing is about them. And then let's see what else. And then most of the things I pulled out were also, I found that while people were using the phrase as more than a hashtag, I also found that a majority of people used retweets instead of just tweeting something directly. So going off my personal basis, I retweet things more than actually tweeting. So I think people found it easier to join this conversation by retweeting somebody else instead of starting their own thread. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you, Kendal. That was great. We're so glad that you joined us, and I let everyone know you weren't here earlier because you had a second poster, so
Yes.
Good for you. That's awesome. Congratulations. So what we're going to do now is I've got it all set up to where the student researchers are going to be in breakout rooms. I will open up the breakout rooms and send them there, and everyone else can let me know if they want to go to a specific breakout room and which one. So thank you again, all students, for your individual work that you've done. At the end of the session, maybe about 3 or 4 minutes before the hour ends, I will pull everybody back in just to say a final thanks and farewell. So I'm going to go ahead and send the student researchers to their breakout rooms. You'll get an invitation. If you don't receive an invitation, make sure you're not in full screen, and perhaps the invitation is sitting underneath of that. So you should all get an invitation to go to your breakout room. If you are not a student, if you're a guest, and you will not have an invitation yet because I don't know where you go, you can let me know if you have a specific room that you want to go to, or I can choose one for you. So you can chat it to the box, or just unmute and let me know where you want to go. Just say your name and where you'd like to go.
I'm Eli, and can I go to Kendal's Astros room?
Sure can. Okay, you should have your invitation.
Lauren Kirby, can I also go to Kendal's room?
Yes. All of us who are missing baseball, huh? Any fix we can get.
Hi, this is Liz. Can I go to David's?